right, so in section 10.1, we're looking at area and circumference of circles. So you've got a nice circle there. Let's just write a few equations and definitions out here that we need to know. So first things first, a dot, okay, is going to indicate the center of a circle. So that's going to be super important throughout this chapter. Because some of the more complicated pictures, for you to be able to find a length or something, you need to know that the dot represents or indicates the center of your circle. Okay, so that's first. So I'll just go ahead and put a dot as close to the center as I possibly can. Lowercase r, okay, stands for, I know you've done this before, the radius. And by definition, guys, the radius is the distance from the center to the edge of the circle. All right, so for instance, if I went from that center dot to the edge, that would be lowercase r. Okay, I'll just make the center dot a little bit bigger. And then, of course, lowercase d again, okay, is diameter. And of course, the diameter is the distance across the entire circle through the center. Distance across entire circle through the center. Okay, so if we come to the picture and we go all the way across, this would be D. Okay, all right, so then how are the radius and the diameter related to each other? Right, that radius could rotate down. Hopefully you're thinking the radius is the diameter divided by 2. Or you could be saying, and you should know it both ways, that the diameter is 2 times the radius, okay, which you can get from the previous equation I just wrote there by cross multiplying. Okay, so now area. Area equation for a circle. Capital A equals pi r squared. Remember our use and our reason for the units, guys. What are units for area always? Squared. That should lead you into, because a lot of people mix this one up with the next one, it's got to be the equation that has a squared in it. Okay, so pi r squared is area. Think about the units. Remember this number pi, special number pi, is approximately 3.14. Okay, but in reality, it goes on forever, right? Like 1, 5, 9, 2, 6, 5, 3, 5, 9, and it just keeps going. All right, you need to know that to get the correct answers that I'm expecting from you, I need you to use the pi key. So find the pi key on your calculator and use that. Okay, that is much more accurate than you just saying, it's 3.14. So you got to use the pi key. Now the next thing you need to know is circumference. All right, and circumference is like perimeter. It's just you use the perimeter for any shape that's not a circle. So perimeter means the distance around the outside of a shape. Circumference means the distance around the outside of a circle. Distance around the outside of the circle. All right, so there's your basics of properties that you need to know for the circle. Now let's practice some problems together. Okay, so for this first one, let's just give you this in the picture. Okay, that's all you need. So I'm asking you to find the area and the circumference. I'm going to keep practicing back and forth with you. Remember what an exact answer is. It means no decimals, but an exact answer is something like 2 root 3, right, versus you approximating that. Or the square root of 2 versus the decimal being like 1.414. Okay, so an exact answer for circles is going to have pi's in it. All right, for area at least. Okay. Oh, we forgot to put something in here. Sorry. We gave you a definition for circumference. Go back, please. But then we didn't give you an equation. So sorry. So here you go. Circumference, capital C, equals 2 pi r. Now again, with my notes of what I said, circumference is like perimeter. It's a length, right? It's a distance. So the unit would be just units to the first. Notice the 2, the pi, and the r, mostly we're talking about the r, is to the first. That's how you know it's 2 pi r. Okay? That's the one I use the most. But based on the information you know, guys, isn't the 2 and the pi times r? Aren't the 2 times the r, isn't that the same as diameter? So you could also say that this is circumference is pi d. Okay, pi times the diameter. All right, those are equivalent. I typically use 2 pi r more often than not. Okay, back to our picture then. So we're finding area and circumference. So here you go. You should get in the habit of writing out the original equation, or I should at least be able to see it in your next step. Okay, again, you've got to have work for these to get credit. So it's going to be pi, the radius is 4, and it's squared. All right, pi is like a variable, guys. It's like an x. So 4 squared is 16. Most of us wouldn't write x times 16. We would write 16x. Okay, so you do the same thing with pi. So 16 pi would be your answer if I ask you to give it to me as an exact answer. Okay, and like I said, we're going to practice both. So here's your answer if I ask for exact. I would like it as a decimal also. Rounded to the nearest hundredth. So get on your calculator, find that pi key, and do 16 times pi, or pi times 16, doesn't matter. You should get 50.27, and you got to have units always, so either one of them would be units squared. So there's your answer that I expect if I want it to be a decimal. We're going to keep practicing both. Okay, we'll keep practicing both for a little bit. All right, so I'll box that for you. And then circumference. I suggest you're writing 2 pi r and filling in. So 2 times pi, and r is 4. All right, so circumference equals 4 times 2 is 8. So 8 pi would be exact. Okay, figure out what those mean now, because you can't ask me on a test or a quiz. And then if I ask for decimal, rounded to the nearest hundredth again, 25.13. Either one of them would be units because it's a length. Okay, so that would be your decimal answer that I would expect for circumference. Okay. All right, next one. Let's give you, we'll go a different color, and let's give you the directions of the following. So give exact answers. And sometimes they will just say, give me answers in terms of pi. I need you to be comfortable with both of those sets of directions. So give answers in terms of pi means you write the pi. Okay, you don't put it in your calculation with your decimal. And give exact answers is what we just practiced on that last one. So for this one, let's give you this as the picture. Okay, so that dot is there. And if they just write 12 root 5, kind of like I did when I labeled on the front, you need to know that the 12 root 5 is labeling the entire length across the circle, so the diameter. Okay? All right, so I know I need R for my area equation, right? So if R is the diameter over 2, well, then the radius is going to be the diameter of 12 root 5 divided in half. So R would be 6 root 5. Okay, so keep that in mind. You're going to need that. And then we go to area. Area equation is pi r squared. Okay, so I can fill in pi. The radius is 6 root 5 that we just found above, squared. And we said we want exact answers or in terms of pi. So I just need to know how to square 6 root 5. Remember, our shortcut for 6 root 5 squared is 6 times 6 times 5. So 36 times 5 is 180, and it would need to be multiplied by pi. So 180 pi units squared would be a full credit answer for the area. Okay. All right, now your circumference. I just want to prove to you it works both ways. So in this case, if I know circumference is pi d and the diameter is what was given to me at the start, okay, then it's probably easier to jump straight to saying pi times the diameter of 12 root 5. Now we need to talk about notation for a moment. Okay, this is like when we did, if you will, for a moment, when we did something like x, remember pi is just like a variable, times 12 times root 5. And remember when we talked about it, we said this was an issue because you can't tell if the x is under the root or not. So we said always you put the variables and the constants in front of the roots. So roots always end up at the back. Okay, that's especially when we're handwriting it. If it's typed, like you might see in some answers in your answer books, then it's okay. But handwritten, which is what you and I are doing all day long on our test quizzes and homework, we want the root to be at the back. Okay, and remember, in this scenario, the pi is like the variable. Okay, so I'm just going to say that this 12 times pi times root 5 is going to be written as 12 pi root 5. You're trying to have the least number of parentheses as possible. And circumference is a unit. It's a length. Okay, so I'm just going to say, let's also do this. So, or your circumference could have been 2 pi r. But if there was any doubt in your mind that you had calculated the radius correctly, I would use the diameter. Okay, but let's show you that it does work. You'd have 2 times pi times the radius we found above of 6 root 5. Okay, that's good for you to practice anyway, to understand. You're really just doing 2 times 6 root 5, okay, which is 12 root 5. And you got to put the pi in the right place, times pi. So 12 pi root 5. Notice, same answer that we just got above. Okay, I will just point out and keep telling you to be careful with the notation. Okay, so we'll put it over here again. 12 root 5 pi is a no. Okay, so watch your notation. Instead, you would want to write that as 12 pi root 5. Okay, because you can't figure out where that root is ending. All right, for the next one, let's give, I'm only going to use the one circle, so if your work overlaps, that's fine. I'm going to use the one on the left, and I'm going to say give decimal answers this time. So we can keep practicing with our different directions. And this time, our picture is going to be that. Okay, there's your dot. All right, so I have everything that I need. I'm going to go ahead and say, and we'll talk about what you have to have and what's suggested. So I suggest that you write the original equation. Okay, that's going to help you get it down. So this is suggested. However, you must have, you can't just jump straight to the answers. Here's the minimum amount you can have, which is pi. The radius is 3.7 squared. So I need to at least see you plugging it into the equation. Okay, so we'll say this step is must. Must have this step. Okay, to get credit. All right, and then you can go to area of, well, they want a decimal answer, so it's going to be 3.7 squared, and then don't forget to hit times pi on your calculator. Rounded to the nearest hundredth, 43.01 units squared. Okay, if we go to circumference, I highly suggest that you write down 2 pi r. Again, suggested. That'll help you get them memorized again. Okay, it also explains to somebody else who's reading your paper what you're doing. Okay, think of you trying to like tutor somebody through this. You would want to write as much as possible. And then filling it in is the minimum required amount of work. So 2 times pi times 3.7. Again, this step would be the must-have. Okay, must have that step. And again, rounded to the nearest hundredth, we would have 23.25. It's a length, so units. All right, that's what these problems are going to look like. Just be super careful to keep going back and forth between the different directions they give you. Decimal versus exact versus in terms of pi. Okay, be super careful. Let's try a couple more. Okay, like word problems. So let's say find the radius of a circle if the area is 144 pi. And then if they put in parentheses exact or decimal, they're telling you what kind of answer to give me. Okay, so for this first one, if we want to find the radius of a circle that has the area 144, well, that's the information that was given to you, just like the other word problems. So start with the information given to you, which was area. So the area equation, yes, you should write this at the start, is pi r squared. Fill in the numbers directly underneath it. So they told you area is 144 pi equals pi r squared. And now I'm not even reading the problem yet. But I noticed that the only thing there for me to find is r. That's the only variable. Okay. I do notice that if I divided both sides by pi at this point, don't they cancel? So I'm really just looking at 144 equals r squared. Okay, you guys know how to solve for r squared. Or I should say you know how to solve for r from r squared. You take the square root. You should recognize that as a perfect square. So the square root of 144 is 12. And it's a length, so it would be 12 units. I go back and read my problem and notice finding the radius is exactly what they wanted. So I'll go ahead and box it. I'm finished with that one. Okay, and they wanted it exact. It is exact. All right, the second one, find the area of a circle if the circumference is 25. And they're telling me I'm going to have decimals. Okay, well, let's see. So starting out with what they gave me, we want to find the area, but the information given to me is that the circumference is 25. So that tips me off to start with the circumference equation of 2 pi r. Okay. Also, I know I need r for area. That's why I don't use d. Okay, that's just my preference. So here we go, filling in the numbers underneath. The circumference they told us is 25 equals 2 pi r. Again, the only thing I see there that I can possibly solve for is r. So if you divide by everything in front of r, just like you normally do, right? If it said 3r, you would divide by 3. I'm dividing by 2 and pi on both sides. Okay? Notice that I'll get these to cancel and I'll be left with the r that I desire. So r is 25 divided by 2 pi. Now keep that exact answer for now, because remember, you can't use a rounded answer, a decimal, rounded answer to get another rounded answer. Okay, so just so that we make sure that you're kind of at the right place, I'm just bringing this up higher. I'm just recopying it. But if you were to type that into your calculator, okay, just because you're going to need to know how to run your calculator, let's practice that. You really should be doing 25 divided by, in parentheses, 2 pi. Okay, so this is like your keystrokes or your calculator notation. I'm just writing that here so that you guys can practice it. Okay. So if you do that correctly, stop and see if you can get 3.978 ... Okay, which means leave it sitting on your calculator. Okay, so if you've got that sitting on your calculator, then now go to what it's asking you for. They didn't ask us for r. Otherwise, I would be rounding the 3.978 to 3.98. That's not what they asked me. Okay, that's why I have to keep the ... So it asked me to find area. Okay, new equation then, just like when we do all these word problems. So your equation now is pi r squared. Okay, so I should see you fill in pi, and then r, you're going to write 3.978 ... to indicate to me that you know to leave it in your calculator. Okay, you're not rounding it, and it's squared. Okay, and therefore we want to be able to get our final answer. So let's talk about keystrokes again, guys. So you should learn how to use your answer key, because you can't do the following, right? You can't round until the end. We said you can't use a rounded answer to get another rounded answer, okay? And therefore, you want to make sure that you're doing something like using your answer key, okay, especially if you're on a graphing calculator. You want to take your answer key, the 3.978, square it, and then say times pi, and push equals. Okay, so we just need to practice with that real quick. Make sure your calculator is out and you're taking the time to practice that. If you're doing it correctly and you're rounding one time and one time only to the nearest hundredth, your answer should be 49.74 units squared. So remember, good questions as you guys are going through this stuff is not just, okay, how do I do the problem? But it's also, did I round correctly? Did I use my calculator correctly? Do I know how to enter that in my calculator? Okay, so keep all of that in mind as you guys are practicing with this stuff.